Sports Scene, Hampton Roads premier interview show with Greg Bicouvaris, each Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11.
And you look at that, 4-4 at home, which is just average, 4-3-1 on the road. I mean, you're not going to win any games like that. They were not the same team after they beat the Packers, yet the Packers were a totally different team.
Interact with Sports Scene on Twitter @GregBic and listen weekly as Greg interviews distinguished guests with excellent commentary and insight. Sports Scene, Saturdays at 10 a.m. on the Lighthouse 100.1 FM. From Chesapeake, Virginia, the Lighthouse 100.1 presents Sports Scene. Sports Scene features local, regional, and nationally acclaimed guests and excellent interviews. Follow Sports Scene on Twitter @GregBic. Now here is Greg Bicouvaris.
Sports Scene presented by HamptonRoadsOnlineMall.com. Greg Bicouvaris along with Andrew. Glad you're with us. Sports Scene is midweek online, Saturday on the radio on WPMH, AM 1010 and 100.1 FM. TuneIn.com. Type in WPMH in the search bar. Saturday mornings at 10. Tell your friends about Sports Scene. Twitter @GregBic, and you can see the rest of my Twitter handles on GJBTV.com. Thank you to our military guest lineup presented by GJBTV.com. Phone line presented by Outback Steakhouse in Kempsville as well. A few more weeks to March Madness. May Kobe's memory be eternal and the victims on the helicopter crash, as well as congratulations to the Chiefs. NBA Wizards select games right here on WPMH. Sports Scene has great interviews, excellent guests, business segments, highlights, commentary, and what teased me off. Thank you for listening to Sports Scene. We love our regulars, tourists who listen online and on the radio. Stay tuned.
A tradition of excellence for over 50 years is the Aberdeen Barn Steakhouse in Virginia Beach. Start your experience off with she crab soup, an assortment of appetizers such as the fried oyster Rockefeller, crispy calamari, just to name a few. Aberdeen Barn has the finest premium steaks, prime rib, grilled tomahawk ribeye, seafood, chicken, pasta dishes, and live music in a most pleasing atmosphere. Open daily. Visit them at 5805 Northampton Boulevard in Virginia Beach. Call 464-1580 and log on to aberdeenbarn.net.
Catch up on archived editions of Sports Scene by going to GJBTV.com and clicking the YouTube image on the homepage. Now back to Sports Scene with Greg Bicouvaris.
Let's welcome from Team 980 in D.C., Kevin Sheehan. How are you, my friend?
What's up, Greg? How are you?
Very good, very good. Always a pleasure to chat with you. Let's get right to it. We'll talk a little bit about the Super Bowl. Obviously, it was a nice win by the Chiefs, and Andy Reid, kind of sentimental. Redskins are very familiar with him, having faced him when he was with the Eagles.
Yeah, it was, it was strange. I'm one of those people, maybe one of the few, that wish Mike Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur and all of them had stayed. So I've developed a relationship with Mike over the years, so I was definitely rooting for Kyle. And at the same time, it was nice to see a guy like Andy Reid win. I personally didn't think going in he needed to win the Super Bowl to be a Hall of Fame coach. I think he had already established that without winning a Super Bowl. That was his 29th playoff game that he had coached in. Which is an awful lot of playoff games to have coached in. But I think the league, a lot of people that know him were certainly happy about it, so it was good to see.
Absolutely, of course. That was like the icing on the cake, or as he likes it, he mentioned his cheeseburgers, the mustard and onions, that he definitely needed to get that credibility. I mean, he's definitely got a lot of credibility, but having that Super Bowl ring, I mean, just ask Dan Marino and some others, that definitely means a lot.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we've seen coaches, have Hall of Fame careers without it. We've seen Hall of Fame, near Hall of Fame careers with multiple Super Bowls, witness a guy like Tom Flores. So Andy Reid's a Hall of Fame coach. I mean, I'm glad he got that for validation, personal validation. But I think people who really know what kind of coach he is. He's been an innovator in the game. He's won big in two places. It was good to see, and it was really a memorable game as well.
Yeah, we could do a whole show just on who's in and who's not. Of course, we mentioned people like Jacoby or Jim Plunkett or Tom Flores, especially Plunkett and Flores. You would think one of those two would eventually get in. And of course, you saw how upset Drew Pearson was. He was livid on YouTube.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, these conversations are so subjective, and yet, longtime football fans, and you and I are in that group of just fans, but longtime football fans, you sort of, have a sense when you hear the name without quantifying it, without having all the numbers in front of you, whether or not that guy was a Hall of Famer. To me, Joe Jacoby is a Hall of Famer. Jerome Bettis is in the Hall of Fame. I remember hearing his name thinking, really? He's a Hall of Famer? I sort of felt the same way with Isaac Bruce the other day. And then I looked at his numbers, and I'm like, wow, he had incredible numbers. But at first blush, I don't think of Isaac Bruce as a Hall of Famer. But, to be honest with you, Bill Cowher gets in. I was a little bit surprised at that. To me, if he's in, then Mike Shanahan should be in the Hall of Fame. So it's a very subjective thing. Ultimately, there's certain names you hear, and you're like, of course. And then there are names you hear sometimes that make you, think, is he or isn't he? I think if you've got to think about it, he shouldn't be. But that's just me. I think we've, in recent years, we've had a lot of, all-time good get into the Hall of Fame rather than all-time great.
Talking to Kevin Sheehan, and Kevin, just picking up from when we last talked barely a few months ago, too. The Redskins were in a mess. The Eagles and the Giants game were like visiting games as far as the fans. Mostly visitor fans were there. They were talking sell the team. But it seems like Snyder, let's give him some credit. I mean, he used to own the stations you and I both worked at in Virginia Beach, Richmond, and D.C. for that matter, that he's cleaned it up. He got Rivera very quickly. Rivera accepted it very quickly, and he's got a staff, and it seems like they've got management, and it seems like everything is starting to at least fall in place.
Yeah, I had Joe Gibbs actually on the show this morning. Joe's always so gracious with his time, and he's always so good. And I essentially said to him, look, I mean, we're all nostalgic to a certain degree, and Joe gets very nostalgic about his days, and I think he knows what's happened here in recent years. He's been in that stadium a couple of times when it's been dead empty, and the only people that have been in it have been the fans of the opposing team. So in many ways, the organization outkicked its coverage hiring Ron Rivera. I didn't expect it to get, essentially the leading resume coach, on the market. I mean, I thought they'd have to settle, as they did with Jay Gruden, as they did with Jim Zorn. I didn't think they'd get, a guy like Rivera. I'm pleased with it. I think he's really qualified. I've always felt like Carolina's teams have been very well coached. But make no mistake about it, if Joe Gibbs had not gotten involved and really, teamed up on the pitching of Ron Rivera with Dan Snyder, I don't know that it happens. Gibbs' influence is significant in this equation, as is a roster that I think Rivera looked at and said, well, that's no 3-13 roster. That's a roster that is every bit 4 or 5, maybe even 6 games better. I think he believes that. Of course, the quarterback will be the big unknown right now, but I think they should be very pleased that they got Ron Rivera. Let's hope it works out differently from previous times in Snyder's history here as the owner over 2 decades, where they've hired resume coaches, Marty Schottenheimer, Mike Shanahan, obviously Joe Gibbs, which I sort of put in its own category. He revered Gibbs. He didn't meddle with Gibbs like he may have with Shanahan and with Schottenheimer after a year firing him. But we've had good coaches come in here before and leave with losing records and looking, a bit tarnished on the way out.
Talking to Kevin Sheehan, you're exactly right, and you mentioned a lot of them. And the Ohio State connection, I was in the booth for 6 of the Redskins games on TV duties this past fall. And of course, Urban Meyer came in there. That created a buzz. Then, of course, he was there to see Haskins. He was at the Army-Navy game before. And let me just get to that. Of course, Gruden wasn't sold on Haskins. I'm not sure. We can go back to the draft. I would love to have been in the war room because, obviously a lot of teams were not sold on Haskins because he was picked in the middle of the first round. A lot of teams passed him by. It seems like Rivera still is not giving him a ringing endorsement. He did not keep his offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to be a fascinating next few weeks, few months, because we're going to learn based on their actions what they think of Dwayne Haskins. Personally, I thought we saw real progress. I thought we saw a real physical talent, and we saw progress, and we went from hearing, no one was really pleased with his work ethic to everybody was pleased with his work ethic. Bill Callahan went out of his way to say that, one thing about Dwayne we've learned is he's not a mistake repeater, and that speaks to somebody being very coachable. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot to be encouraged about, watching him this year. I think he's competitive. I think he's tough. I think he appears to be a fast learner, and he certainly has the physical skills. But what Rivera has said from day one is he's got to take over the leadership mantle. And Gibbs was on with me today, and there was no ringing endorsement of Haskins from Gibbs. But I'm not suggesting that Gibbs was negative about Haskins. He wasn't. But there was no ringing, obvious endorsement from Gibbs. And if people want to hear that interview, it's at the Team980.com or on the Team980 app. Gibbs was really interesting when it came to answering the question about how he would evaluate or has evaluated Haskins. And I think he looks for a leader as well. Think about all the quarterbacks that he coached. None of them were brilliant with talent. Theismann was a talent for sure, and Rippon had big arm talent, as did Doug Williams. But more times than not, it was about the leadership that Gibbs looked for, and I think Rivera's the same way. And I don't think they know yet on Dwayne when it comes to whether or not he's that kind of leader. Only personal experience will sort of give them the answer on that.
Yeah, because the Redskins had Schrader mixed in there with Doug Williams, and obviously Doug, was very quiet and shy back then, but he emerged after he got the big win against the Broncos during the Super Bowl, and he had a pretty good career with Tampa Bay as well. So, that's and to Urban Meyer's credit, Cardell Jones, Haskins, Burrow, he knows how to develop quarterbacks. So, we'll see. Haskins, I guess it's just a matter of time, get a full season under his belt and see what happens. But whether it's his demeanor, his posture, I don't know if that is an issue, but it seems like I'm not hearing the energy from Rivera. This is my guy for it's February. We're on it right now with Haskins. I want to hear that still, and I'm not hearing that.
Well, I don't think, as a fan personally, I want to hear him crowned as the starter in January or February, a month after the coach got, into town. I think what we're hearing is some posturing. I think what we're hearing is a challenge. I think Rivera is coming in here, and I think for now, he really is in charge, and he's not going to hand the job to this kid. He's going to make him earn it. And, I think one thing we won't see next year is we won't see at the end of the game a quarterback over, taking selfies with fans while there's still a snap to be had. So I think there's a lot of that in play. But, again, my personal perspective is I went in sort of thinking what a lot of teams around the NFL thought. Just as a fan, I thought, I don't know if he's a first-round guy. I don't know if, he basically clapped 5 times, looked at a chart, and threw 50 touchdowns at Ohio State, a lot of them sideways.
Right.
And there was a lot of that. But with that said, after seeing him start 7 games at the pro level, I'm encouraged, much more encouraged than I thought I would be. He's competitive, highly competitive. He's tough. He's got every physical tool, makes every throw. He's big. I saw tremendous progress, and I also saw a guy that in a couple of those clutch moments delivered. And it's a rookie. In his first 7 starts, and against Detroit, he's having a terrible game, and they need 2 field goal drives at the end, and he went 6 for 9 and had a couple of key scrambles. With the game on the line, I personally saw growth, and I'm excited about what we might see over the next few years.
Right, because for a young kid, he's still very young. He shakes things off very well, and that's a lesson in life. Just let it
no
roll.
Doubt.
I mean,
he never. The one fear, Greg, when you think about it, early in the season, he's not ready. You're going to rattle him. He's going to be overwhelmed. I never had the sense, watching him as a fan, that he was ever overwhelmed. In fact, he carried himself with, like a guy with a ton of confidence, a ton of belief, and a guy that you weren't going to rattle, and he had some obvious, situations of adversity, in some of those games that he was playing in. And I never felt like you were going to break his psyche. He's in fact, let's think about a Gibbs quarterback. Jason Campbell, nice guy. You never got the sense that there was an urgency about him, that there was a strong, competitive relentlessness. I got that sense watching Dwayne Haskins last year. I did. Maybe no one else did, but I think those are some of the things that you want to see in your starting quarterback.
Right, because he did play at big stage, against a lot of fans in the audience against Ohio State and Michigan. So he was used to that. The only negative I saw in him was the press conferences, but that takes a lot of time to get ready. He was giving one-word short answers, but Kevin, I think that's more of a millennial thing than anything else. Just that,
you know what? It might be that, but I also think, first of all, you mentioned something about Ohio State. He came into the NFL playing in front of crowds essentially a third of the size that he played in front of at Ohio State, especially the home games this year. The pressure on him at Ohio State was much greater than the pressure here. With respect to the press conferences and some of the social media stuff, that is, right now just sort of a reflection of a lot of the young players. But I also think in his defense, he came in a real difficult situation. He came in with, essentially the owner making the pick. Personnel didn't have him rated that high. The head coach didn't want him. And it was not the easiest of situations for him to come in. This was, as we know, has been a highly dysfunctional organization for a long period of time and not really fit to handle, a first-round quarterback, with owner and team president and everything else that was, just always off the rails, it seemed like. I thought he adapted pretty well, and once they did get some stability with Callahan and some support, with Kevin O'Connell and Callahan, I thought we saw some growth.
Absolutely. Talking to Kevin Sheehan. We'll take a short break. We'll come back with the second part of the interview on Sports Scene after these messages. Mark your calendar for May 28th to May 31st. The Saints Constantine and Helen Greek Orthodox Church in Newport News presents the Newport News Greek Festival. Eat, drink, and celebrate authentic Greek culture on the peninsula. Located at 60 Traverse Road, off exit 258B on Route 17 in Newport News. Celebrating a taste of Greece in Newport News. For more, log on to newportnewsgreekfestival.org.
A tradition of excellence for over 50 years is the Aberdeen Barn Steakhouse in Virginia Beach. Start your experience off with she crab soup, an assortment of appetizers such as the fried oyster, Rockefeller, crispy calamari, just to name a few. Aberdeen Barn is the finest premium steaks, prime rib, grilled tomahawk ribeye, seafood, chicken, pasta dishes, and live music in a most pleasing atmosphere. Open daily. Visit them at 5805 Northampton Boulevard in Virginia Beach. Call 464-1580 and log on to aberdeenbarn.net.
Interact with Sports Scene on Twitter at Greg Bick. Email bicogb@hotmail.com. Now back to Greg Bicouvaris in the Hampton Roads OnlineMall.com studios.
And we'll thank our good friends at Panera in Virginia Beach at 1397 Fordham Drive. Go by and see Caitlin and the friendly staff. Give her a call at 361-2425. Open 7 days a week. Excellent soups, salads, sandwiches, breads, desserts, beverages. They have it all at Panera on Fordham Drive. Open daily. All right, welcome back to Sports Scene right here on WPMH AM and FM. TuneIn.com. Listen anywhere in the world on the TuneIn app or on your computer by going to TuneIn.com, typing WPMH to listen to Sports Scene. Always archived on Twitter and YouTube. Kevin, as we switch gears, XFL in D.C., here you go. Another sports competition. The other league did not last even throughout the season. Of course, the XFL was branded by the WWE, which is on Fox on Friday nights. Fox is part of this. ESPN's part of this. My thing is, will it sustain? I guess for the Redskins, they have a kind of a feeder team. I guess maybe I don't know what they would get out of this, but or football in general. But I guess the ideal situation, you got Jim Zorn involved the first weekend and Cardell Jones. Those aren't bad selling points. But as the weather gets colder, will anybody show up?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm mixed on this. On one hand, it's football. You've got legalized sports betting increasing state by state. I'm always looking for action. Football's the number one bet sport in this country. With that said, nothing's ever worked. People, when it comes to football season, there's a rhythm to it. There's a calendar sort of rhythm to it. It's September through the Super Bowl. People, it's a scheduled thing, which is why it's so successful. You know, it's Sundays, it's Sunday nights, it's Monday nights, it's Thursday nights, it's, you know, weekends during the fall that turn into winter, that turn into the holidays, that turn into playoffs and the Super Bowl. And I think people actually need a bit of a break, you know, and I say that, and yet the Indy Combine, you know, at the end of the month will outrate the NBA playoff first and second round games and crush the NHL hockey games in ratings. And then we know what happens with free agency in the NFL draft in terms of the interest level. We'll see. I mean, no other leagues work. This one's got 2 big television contracts and more access to betting on football than has ever existed before. That's what it has going for them.
Yeah, I don't feel a whole lot of buzz. I don't feel a whole lot of buzz other than the TVs branding them. I just, you know, they're still competing against the NBA. They're going to compete against March Madness. They're going to compete against spring training, like you said, the NFL Combine. I'm a total calendar guy. I go from football to basketball to baseball, a little tennis and golf, back to football again. And I just, and even the soccer. You know, this is what surprised me, Kevin. The soccer team, the DC United, used to moan and groan about the RFK Stadium playing as a dual field. What about this? I mean, this is right during their season.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak to DC United. I mean, I think the MLS is, you know, major niche in this country. I mean, you know, we know it's the NFL, it's college football, it's the NBA, Major League Baseball, and March Madness.
Yeah.
You know, that's really what we're talking about in terms of mass appeal in this country. Even hockey in most markets is majorly niche. It isn't in this market anymore because they've got a Stanley Cup champion and they've got a superstar of all time in Alex Ovechkin. But you know, God bless DC United and as successful as they've been. I don't know what they're thinking or even what the back, sort of the back story is on stadium and stadium sharing, Greg. Sorry.
Right. But you're exactly right, though, Kevin. I mean, hockey might not be a high-rated sport, but it's a big deal in D.C., and I think
it's gotten to be that way, definitely.
Yeah.
They needed to win that Stanley Cup, though, because it was very, you know, niche in this market as well, even though Ted Leonsis would try to tell you otherwise. Winning that Stanley Cup in combination with, you know, the football team being so down, the Nats are still bigger. If you look at television ratings and of big games, the Nats are much bigger than what hockey generated, even in the Stanley Cup season. But Alex Ovechkin's, you know, one of the biggest athletic superstars in the history of this city. There's no way to debate that. He's probably the greatest team sport athlete in this city's history, unless you want to go back to Sammy Baugh or Walter Johnson, you know, which nobody, you know, alive now can go back to. So and not only that, he's an utterly likable superstar. So that's really, been the label for all of this. It's the Caps and it's hockey, yes, but it's also really about Ovechkin.
Right, but it's the Caps and hockey that are competing against this XFL, and I just don't think the XFL, unless they're giving away free tickets, I'd like to see how the game 4 and 5, unless they're undefeated, are going to draw. I'm not into niche sports. You know, it's an Olympic year. They have a lot they're going against as well. So
I think you're right. Yeah. And I think, you know, they're going to get burned by starting so early, although we've had a very mild winter on the East Coast, and
sure.
I don't know what it's going to be the rest of February, but, you know, you take that risk early in the season with bad weather in your East Coast and Midwest cities. I think there's a Midwest team. I think St. Louis has a team where, you know, you potentially are playing in horrible weather, which isn't going to help either.
Zorn coming back, is that going to boost any potential?
No,
not at all.
Zero interest.
Zero interest.
I bet you half of the sports fans in the city don't even know that the XFL is launching this weekend. And then if they do, a very small percentage of those people know anything about Zorn coaching the Seattle whatever team, Dragons or whatever they are.
Yeah, and it's almost laughable. You won't see Larry and your former partner Cooley out there either, I'm sure, promoting it. Talking to Kevin Sheehan right here. Kevin, a few nuggets here before we let you go. You mentioned the Caps. They did win the Stanley Cup a few years ago with the same owner, Leonsis, and I think that's kind of given a little bit of a break to the Wizards, the fact that he owns both. If the Caps wouldn't have won, it would have been put more pressure not only on the Caps but the Wizards, but the Wizards just can't get out of their own way. I mean, they'll beat an occasional good team, but there's never been consistency with Brooks and that team without the injuries there with Wall, of course. There's no silver lining, it seems like. Isaiah Thomas, in my opinion, I've never seen a guy in my life who, even when he's on defense, looks like he's on offense ready to score.
Yeah, well, you didn't see me play when I was younger. I had zero interest in defense.
Sure.
I'm kidding. But they're irrelevant right now. And it's interesting because D.C. at its core is really a basketball city. It's got the best high school basketball in the country, you could argue. It's got two powerful programs, in Maryland and Georgetown, and Maryland's ranked at the top 10, and they're right now contending for a Big Ten title, and people are much more interested in that than the Wizards. I mean, they're totally irrelevant right now. It's a shame because you really need luck in the NBA. You need to land in that one spot where you pick the right player and that player becomes a top 5 player. You don't win a title in this league without having a top 5 player on your roster. Before Kawhi Leonard went to Toronto, we did a whole segment, I'll never forget it, where I said I would trade John Wall, Bradley Beal, and the entire team if that's what it took to get Kawhi Leonard, because you can't win a title without a top 5 player, and Wall and Beal are good players, but they're nowhere near top 5 players. And Toronto didn't have to trade their whole team to get him, but they took the 1-year roll of the dice, and it paid off in a big way for them. You really do have to either be incredibly bold or really lucky in the NBA, and the Wizards really haven't been either for a long period of time.
Right. We talk a couple things about broadcasting real quick. Of course, this is part 2 for you back at Team 980. We mentioned you were with Red Zebra for several years, and you even came down here and did a show one time, and I've met you at Redskins games and other venues as well. How is it for you part 2 personally? Because you did have a podcast. I believe you're still doing it, and your thoughts on that. I also want to get your thoughts, too. It has kind of gone under the radar the last few months about Buckhantz not doing the Wizards. It seems like he's still on Twitter, still very bitter about that.
Well, I'll answer that first. Buck's been a lifelong friend,
sure.
And the broadcast misses him terribly.
Yes.
Buck, I think, I'm not objective when it comes to Buck, but I really think he was one of the best play-by-play guys out there. He had a very Pat Summerall-esque style of letting the action breathe, but really hitting the right note when it was required. I think the team stinks this year, so the ratings were going to be low to begin with, but they're barely even noticeable. And I think Buck and Phil Chenier as partners for nearly a quarter of a century was a great broadcast through a lot of lean years. So I think it misses him a lot. As far as, I was off a year from radio, but it's amazing. You learn a lot. This whole podcast world is, it's definitely viable. I mean, it was, for me, a great outlet and a great way to stay in touch with the people that enjoyed my radio show for 14 years. But it's great to be back on radio, too. The people that the people I've worked with forever up here, Doc Walker and Brian Mitchell and Steve Zabin and Al Galdi and Scott Lynn and Chris Johnson, our PD. We've all sort of been together for so long at the station that it really is. That was the worst part about not being there for a year, was not being able to hang out with all those guys.
And that's true, because not everybody always gets along and civil, but you guys were very civil. And I'll say this, because I was an employee for 6 years with Red Zebra. They did take care of us, salary, benefits, 401k. So I want to give some credit to Dan Snyder. He did take care of his Red Zebra without meddling, but not every radio station can do that, and we live in a very entrepreneurial world where you have to have business on the side, and you're a great example of that as well. So last thing, spring. The Nats won the World Series. It's been very quiet going into spring training. It's all about the other teams and the scandals, it seems like. No Rendon, though. This will be very interesting.
Yeah, it's really going to be bittersweet to a certain degree for them to roll out the 2020 season without Anthony Rendon at third base. That's the part of it that really stinks. It was, at least Strasburg's here, but Rendon was such a big part of it. And talk about a reluctant superstar and at the same time a real likable superstar. It was Anthony Rendon. And we may be, missing out here on the best stretch of his career because, 30 years old, he's essentially now, in his prime and, for 3, 4, 5 more years probably. But he did what he needed to do, right? He played incredibly well and they won a World Series. And you're right, nobody's talking about him. In fact, after this Dodger trade last night, the Dodgers are going to be prohibitive favorites in the National League to repeat. And you'll probably have 2 or 3 other teams that'll be picked ahead of the Nats, especially without Rendon. They don't have an answer right now or an obvious answer at third base. But still, Greg, it was really one of the more incredible months this city's had in a long time last October.
Sure.
It was thrilling to go through as a sports fan in this city. And even though they'd gotten that Stanley Cup a few years earlier, it really, to me, was almost the Stanley Cup times 5, the way it felt during that month of October with all of those dramatic games and comebacks and, Strasburg's, postseason performance. It was magical.
And I have to leave you on this note. You're exactly right, of course, and sandwiched in between a Kirk Cousins Vikings and Redskins game during the World Series. So there's a lot going on. You're a big Maryland guy. I got to ask you, there's been pressure on the coach about evolving in the postseason. He has not evolved in the postseason. He has good regular seasons. Are you nervous about this postseason?
Well, yeah, I am, but I like Mark, and I think the fan base,
Sure.
the Maryland fan base is extremely passionate. Maryland basketball has a massive following. It's unique for, a big market, a top 5, top 6 market to have college basketball be a big deal, but Maryland's always been passionately followed in 2 cities, really, shared by Baltimore and Washington, and the pressure has always been great, whether it was in the ACC or the Big Ten. And the problem with Turgeon is he's a really good coach, but he's not Gary. He hasn't consistently gotten this team into the second weekend of the tournament, which seems to most Maryland fans as a reasonable ask. They're not asking for Sweet 16, Final Four every year, but every 5 years, I think Maryland fans think they should be in the Sweet 16, 2 of those years, and maybe a third year, a legitimate run to the Final Four. It's a top 20 program, top 15, top 10 job, and Turgeon's a good coach. He's won everywhere he's gone. He's got 447 wins or whatever.
Sure.
You don't get that way without being a good coach. He's an outstanding defensive coach. This may be the team. I mean, this is the team. He's got 2 Wooden Award finalists in Anthony Cowan and Stick Smith, who's really come into his own, and this is a team the fan base will not put up with a first weekend and out in March.
Yeah.
This needs to be a second weekend minimum team, or there's going to be a lot of pressure on the athletic director to do something. But I think he's got a really good chance. They've got a chance to win the Big Ten regular season title. In this Big Ten this year, Greg, the best basketball league we've seen top to bottom in a long time. It could end up with 10, 11 teams in the Big Dance.
Right, but this is a perfect year for Maryland to really evolve because it's not, you look at Duke and a few others. There's teams are a small margin of error for each team. Maryland's got just as good a chance as anybody if they put it together like Virginia did last year.
Yeah, Maryland's loaded. They've got the senior point guard who's, going to be a first-team All-Big Ten player more likely than not in a somewhere in the All-American mix. Jalen Smith, their sophomore 6'10", power forward who's playing center, is developed into a monster. He's probably the best shot blocker in the country. He stretches people out, shoots threes. He's athletic. And then they've got really, really good complementary players. I mean, Maryland's always got a certain level of talent. This may be the I don't know if it's his deepest team, but I think 1 through 6, 1 through 7, it's probably as good a team as Sturgeon's had, and they play well together. Yeah, you're right. In a year where there's not a dominant team, why not Maryland?
Right. Kevin, all the best. You are the best. And talk about your show that's on every weekday when people can hear you.
Yeah, I'm on the Team 980 in D.C., 7 to 10 a.m. every morning. And we're having a blast doing the show. And if you're driving through D.C. or you just want to listen, to the app or to the podcast, the team980.com, the Team 980 app.
Kevin, all the best. Your show is great. And, of course, always the people down here in Hampton Roads enjoyed you as part of the Redskins pre- and post-game show over the years as well. Have a great rest of the week.
Greg, great to catch up, as always.
My pleasure, Kevin. Thank you. Kevin Sheehan right there from the Team 980. Sports Scene will continue after these messages. Mark your calendar for May 28th to May 31st as St. Constantine and Helen Greek Orthodox Church in Newport News presents the Newport News Greek Festival. Eat, drink, and celebrate authentic Greek culture on the peninsula. Located at 60 Traverse Road, off exit 258B on Route 17 in Newport News. Celebrating a taste of Greece in Newport News. For more, log on to newportnewsgreekfestival.org.
You are listening to Sports Scene with Greg Bicouvaris. Now, back to Greg. It's now time for Greg's Highlights, presented by HamptonRoadsOnlineMall.com.
Highlights, GJBTV.com, HRSMHOF.com, HamptonRoadsOnlineMall.com. Click GJBTV.com's website and go to the YouTube link for archive shows as well. Question of the day presented by Buffalo Wild Wings and Newport News to our esteemed producer, Andrew. Andrew, how often in the course of a week, 7 days, at least for dinner, do you sit down with the family and share a meal and talk together?
I would say if you're talking about dinner, about 4 times a week. All meals all together, probably closer to like 15, I would think, something like that. So not a ton, but we definitely prioritize it.
Very good. That's a lot. That's not bad in the course of a week with everybody's schedule here and there. I guess it'll be different, too, as they get older, your kids.
Oh, absolutely. And the more activities they get and the more different directions they pull us in.
Very good. I want to thank our good friends at Buffalo Wild Wings and Newport News. Go by and see Paul and the friendly staff for great lunch, dinner, appetizers, salads. They have a great app you can download as well. Traditional wings, burgers, all the great food and beverages you like, a kids menu, all the games on TV, your March Madness headquarters. Go by and see college basketball, the NBA, NHL. They have it all at Buffalo Wild Wings and Newport News next to Patrick Henry Mall. The address is 12150 Jefferson Avenue. Give them a call at 249-3999. And welcome back to Sports Scene right here on WPMH every Saturday morning from 10 to 11 on AM 1010, 100.1 FM. For more, go to GJBTV.com. Click the YouTube link. Greg Bicouvaris at Greg Bick on Twitter. Always a pleasure to focus on our monthly featured guest, George McClain from the Marksman. George, happy February.
And same to you, Greg. How you been doing this month?
Very good so far. I guess we'll start off on a couple notes that involved the officers and firearms. We want to say our condolences to the Newport News police officer, Katie Thine, who lost her life a few weeks ago. Then recently, a friend of your building there, Mr. Andy Duncan. Talk about those two.
Well, Andy is the one I've got the knowledge and experience with. Andy was a good friend and a model employee. And he had started with us the day after his retirement from the Newport News Police Department, where he retired as a sergeant, and came on immediately as a firearms instructor and a course instructor, and just the students loved him to death. He did a very good job for us. And unfortunately, with his illness, he had temporarily gone into everyone thought remission, and then it came back as that type of thing so often does, and with great gusto. And so he passed away a couple of days ago. His service is scheduled for Friday, and his obituary is supposed to be in the paper tomorrow. I don't remember the exact times off the top of my head, but you can check the paper, and we'll have all the details listed there.
Yeah, condolences. And speaking of Katie Fine, who lost her life a few weeks ago, as we're talking to George McClain from the Marksman, that was unfortunate. But one thing we've always talked on this show is be prepared, and that's true. We've talked about police officers, whether local or state police, that are stopping someone. You just never know. I'm not sure if she had somebody else with her, but she was in a very rough area of the city. We'll just leave it at that. And it was in the evening, and that was a very unfortunate thing. You rarely see Newport News or any police officers getting killed in the line of duty, but we're not naive. It does happen.
It does. I know we all like to think we're invincible at times, but the truth of the matter is that you especially a police officer, you have to be on guard 100% of the time, and a lot of times that causes some consternation with the public, and they always want to know, well, how come that police officer has this attitude? And I tell my concealed classes, if you get stopped, give the officer a break. They want to go home tonight just like the rest of us do. And because of that, they if they don't know you, and chances are they don't, when they make a stop, they've got to be extremely suspecting of what's the worst that can happen in this situation, and they have to be prepared for it. Mm-hmm. And you may think, well, it's just a traffic stop. I was doing 40 in a 35, and you got stopped. That's some of the stuff that causes officers to be murdered in just something like that. You think it's a low, a no pressure stop, and all of a sudden, the guy rolls down a window and puts a gun in your belly and pulls the trigger, and it's all over. So you just have to expect everything.
In this case, I believe the woman unfortunately got murdered in a different way by dragging, and that's just horrible. May her memory be eternal. We'll leave it at that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, may her memory be eternal. Very young lady, very unfortunate. And, of course, hopefully that's a learning tool, I guess, too, George, that even for the police officers, they have to learn as well. It's always evolving.
Yeah, and just when you think you have it figured out, someone's going to throw you a curveball, and you figure out that you don't. So it's always, I don't want to say something new. It's not the first time that, it's an officer's been killed by dragging. That has happened before, but obviously it's not something that you hear about very frequently.
Right.
And right when you least expect something, that's usually when it happens.
Yep. Talking to George McClain.
Bad situation.
Yeah, very, very bad all around. Of course, affected not only locally, but regionally and nationally as well. It was very well attended as far as the events around her passing. Talking to George McClain. And George, we put all your shows on, not only live radio, but YouTube, Twitter, social media. And going through YouTube, sometimes you see things happening like people pickpocketing in convenience stores. There's a video for everything. But I guess even any type of retail business, you have a retail business, the odds of it happening there are slim and none. But, give some advice to some of those people that do have retail businesses, convenience stores especially, that are easily pickpocketed.
Well, your best defense there obviously is our video cameras, to where you've got some proof. Our goal would be to prevent that from happening to start with. And in that particular case, make sure that you don't have, anything protruding from any of your pockets. Don't show off anything valuable like that where someone could lift your wallet or get in your pocketbook, or even take the whole pocketbook and go. But safety measures. Make sure everything is secured within your body, but then within the store complex, whatever it is to make sure that security is set up where you've got cameras that's monitoring everything. So if push comes to shove, something happens like that in your facility, at least you may, this is not a guarantee, but you may have the whole incident on video from several different angles, which can only help you.
Yeah, the more the merrier, too. And you've always said try not to take the law in your own hands, because you never know what they're going to have with them, a knife or a gun or an accomplice or something. The odds are they're catching you off guard already by stealing. But, you know, you look at some of these other videos that are on YouTube, it's amazing, whether it's a bad incident in court, you know, where the sheriffs have to be prepared, or somebody being chased. I mean, even in big box stores, people being harassed or chased around by bullies. Bullies do happen for adults as well, and there's nothing worse than seeing someone being chased or you know, just totally taken advantage of.
Well, that's right, and but you have to make the call. How do you respond? You know, to that. You know, the law restricts your engagement in that. Is that you cannot respond to what they would consider a non-lethal attack with anything more than non-lethal force. In other words, you can't use deadly force to respond to a non-lethal attack. Now, you're the judge on that at the time. You know, that happens, but the law states very, very plainly that you have to have a reasonable fear of death or serious bodily injury. So it doesn't have to be a death deal, but serious bodily injury justifies, you know, a lethal force response. But once that force or that, you know, once they stop doing whatever it is they're doing, your actions have to cease. You, at that point, you know, it's get on your phone, cell phone, 911, call and report it. Let the police officers do their job. You're not a police officer, so use your head. Don't let your emotions get you, you know, in trouble. I've got personal knowledge of individuals who have gone after the bad guy and responded that way and spent some time in prison because of that. So your job is not to apprehend, it's not to chase down and further aggravate the situation. It's to get yourself free, keep yourself safe and your family, and dial 911 and let those trained and authorized to apprehend take it from there.
Yeah, because a lot of the criminals, they don't value life to begin with, so they're not going to value your life either. So you're exactly right. Talking to George McClain, let's switch gears on that note. Talk about some of the stuff that people are talking about in the news as far as AR-15 silencers and Cerakote services. Talk about some of that.
Well, that's everyone's favorite gun to try to talk bad about, and my whole thing with all of it is that the ones doing the talking know absolutely nothing about the firearm, and they say it's an assault weapon. It's assault in name only. It's not the type that the military and typically police officers don't. The ones that they would use are fully automatic. The AR-15 is not fully automatic; it's a semi-automatic. If you put a round from that bullet, that 223 caliber ammo, and put it beside your standard 30-06 hunting cartridge, and then ask someone to make a comparison, they would say, well, that bullet, that 223 bullet, is very, very small. It can't be such a big deal, and it's not, other than the fact that any bullet of any size can kill, and that's the problem. So it's the AR-15. It's got that military look to it. It imitates the M16 or M4 that it's modeled after. So that's its drawing card. Everyone says, well, okay, but you can get 30-round magazines. That's true. You can, but anyone with any the basic training, I can take any student and inside of probably 10 minutes with any model Glock that you want, and some of them will hold 15 to 17 rounds in the magazine, and so you can double or triple that. Have these magazines in your pocket, or if the gun control proponents, they want to limit magazines to 10 rounds. So, okay, we'll limit it to that. So I've got 3 10-round magazines. That's 30 rounds. I can change the magazine between shots and never miss a shot at the end of the deal. So, it's if that's their goal, to decrease the number of shots available, it makes no sense. the ones that are advocating all the gun control right now, they say they want reasonable gun measures, gun control safety measures to stop the violent deaths. Well, that's not going to stop any violent deaths, because the ones that's doing it, the firearms are on the street. They go out there and do it. They seldom get anything legally. They either steal it or they'll buy it off a gang member someplace and go and do the same thing. So they're the only people that get kind of corralled into all this are the law-abiding citizens, people that you're not going to be having to worry about going out and committing a crime with a firearm. Most of these people are concealed carry firearms owners and holders. Those are the most law-abiding citizens out there. They've all undergone background checks. So those are the ones that they're after to restrict.
Were you pleased with the General Assembly this past year?
No. There's several. Too many people want to jump on that bandwagon, and I think they wanted to see what all they could get through, and I think a lot of them showed, okay, if we can get this, this year, what's up for next year. So there's several that, and we got a couple of good organizations. VCDL is a good group. It's Virginia Citizens Defense League, and they go to bat for all of us. NRA as well goes to bat, and so they have prevented some of the bills, but there's a lot of them that's going through. So we just have to wait and see. And but I don't see anything good happening this year.
Final few moments here with George McClain. George, you're open 7 days a week. Talk about what's new at the Marksman. Google it in Newport News, right there in the northern Denbigh section. Convenient to both sides of the water. Very convenient to Newport News, York County, Pocosin, and Williamsburg.
Yep, come in and see us. We still have plenty of range deals, especially if you're a concealed permit holder. If you're military, law enforcement, you get the special deals, rates on that. Memberships are available, and that's a math deal. If you shoot a lot, a membership's going to save you a ton of money. Mondays and Fridays, we've got special deal. Your first responders and military law enforcement has free range fee days on the 15th and the 30th of the month. So take a break, come in and see us.
Very convenient hours, located at 520 Industrial Park Drive in Newport News. The Marksmen, like them on Facebook. You also can Google them and, of course, see their wonderful website. But better yet, go there and visit, take a class, and learn from somebody. I guess the $64 million question on a little lighter note as we ended here, George. How was life at the Marksmen without BJ?
Well, he's missed.
Yes, of course.
But he's getting along fine, and we've got others that's moved up to fill his shoes. So life goes on, and you just have to deal with the little changes that you run across. Although he was a pretty major change, but he wanted to make a career change. He's got 2 college degrees, and he wanted to work in that field, and so he is excelling in that. And not to change the subject, I do want to correct. I think I told you the 15th and the 30th was our free range days for military. It's the 1st and the 15th.
Very good.
I had 30th in my mind, but 1st and the 15th. But back to BJ, he pops down a couple times a month, and so you may see him one day. We'll be in there. And may go in and shoot. But he's doing very well, and we've recovered from his loss, but obviously I still miss him.
He's still alive and well, folks, just in another state, but he's in Maryland, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Very good. Of course, the family still runs the wonderful store there. George, all the best. Thank you for enlightening us like you always do, and we look forward to talking to you in March.
Thank you, Greg. You take care.
Thank you. George McClain right there from the Marksman. Stay tuned. Sports Scene will continue after these messages. Mark your calendar for May 28th to May 31st as Saints Constantine and Helen Greek Orthodox Church in Newport News presents the Newport News Greek Festival. Eat, drink, and celebrate authentic Greek culture on the peninsula. Located at 60 Traverse Road, off exit 258B on Route 17 in Newport News. Celebrating a taste of Greece in Newport News. For more, log on to newportnewsgreekfestival.org.
What tees you off? Presented by HamptonRoadsOnlineMall.com.
Want to thank our good friends at Outback Steakhouse in Kempsville. Go by and see Mike and the staff at 1255 Fordham Drive in Virginia Beach, now delivering. Give them a call at 523-4832. Great food 7 days a week. Spacious, nice dining area, lunch and dinner daily. They have special occasions, great for Valentine's Day and any occasion for lunch and dinner. Burgers, steaks, soup, salads, all the good stuff at Outback Steakhouse in Kempsville. Something for everyone. All right, what teased me off, Andrew, when you get a bottle of water, whether you buy it from the convenience store or the grocery store, when it's so filled to the top, it spills when you try to open up the cap.
Oh, absolutely. You pay, $5 for some water, and then half of it ends up on your shirt.
Exactly. People who talk, Andrew, big, but don't deliver.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the dividing line between so many people, right? You've lots of people have the talk, but okay, can you walk it out? Whether it's sports, business, whatever else, yeah, that's the dividing line. Can you actually deliver?
And those of us that own businesses or personal too, when we're trying to get an answer or a solution, we're stuck in the middle. We're just kind of waiting in no man's land for that final close or final answer, or give me something good, tell me something, and you don't get anything.
Oh, absolutely. My other job, I work with a lot of contractors. There's some great contractors out there, but most people know a lot of times you end up in these weird no man's lands of what's going on, what's the update, when is it going to be finished, how much is it going to cost? Answers that you feel like should be really easy to get that suddenly are just not forthcoming at all.
And they could just pile on and pile on. We just kind of, texting is vague to begin with. Arrogance is never good.
No, it's not. And there's the confidence and arrogance can sometimes look similar, so I think that's a challenging thing, because you want people to be confident and to be strong in what they're doing. But yeah, once you enter that arena, then you just embitter people and you close doors and burn bridges.
Fear, anger, hate, suffering. Let's get rid of that. Let's just get rid of it altogether.
Absolutely. And it begins with us. We've got to start working on ourselves every day, commit to being a little bit better, shining a little bit brighter, and helping other people do the same.
Nancy Pelosi's conduct recently at the State of the Union. I'm sorry, you're an adult. Kids are watching. Be a role model. Don't act like a temper tantrum and rip paper just because you don't like the person speaking. Agree to disagree.
Yeah, I think that was just not a good look for her. I haven't surveyed all of people's responses on both sides of the aisle, but what I've seen so far is I think a lot of people thought, this is just not a good look at all.
Just very childish inside the chambers there as well. Andrew, we used to hear about this word hybrid car, hybrid this. We get stuck on these words. Now it's about, the narrative is this, the narrative is that, or you're a unicorn. And we get on these words, and now everybody starts using them.
Yeah, I honestly feel like these different trends and language that you're talking about are just started by people who are like selling books and teaching courses and stuff like that, where it's just, okay, we all mean the same thing, whether it's optics or paradigm or whatever word you want to use. I think it's just another way for people to dress it up so they can sell a book or sell some kind of teaching method or whatever. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, just be yourself, folks. Just be yourself. And of course, one of our good friends at Oh Yummy Sushi on Great Neck Road and Sakura Japanese Restaurant in Chesapeake on Sam's Drive. Stay tuned.
Pointing the way in Hampton Roads. W261DI 100.1 FM Norfolk. AM 1010 WPMH Portsmouth. The Lighthouse. Mold. Trash. Rodents. Snakeskin. Even deceased animals. No, this isn't a Halloween shopping list. It's what might be under your house, in your crawl space. Schedule a free crawl space inspection with the Crawl Space Company and find out what's in your crawl space. Call 757-394-3494 to schedule your free inspection or visit thecrawlspacecompany.net. So, do you know what's in your crawl space?
Thank you, too, for your great show, because it really makes people think about topics that are important. I listen and I love, and I've called in before, too. I just really appreciate your program. I also think that it's good to have debates because it lets us all dig a little deeper. Hey, what does God's Word say about that? So I appreciate your show. I think it's great, and I think we all should be digging deeper into the Word of God and seeking God as to what He's called us to do.
Be sure to tune into Picking Up the Habit every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. here on the Lighthouse 100.1 FM.
Want to thank our good friends at CP Shuckers. Go by and see Matt and Mark. Great locals tradition on Shore Drive, Pacific Avenue. Delicious food, great appetizers, great entrees, great specials. All the games on TV. Your sports headquarters, your food headquarters is CP Shuckers in Virginia Beach. Like them on Facebook. Want to thank our great guest today, Kevin Sheehan from Team 980 in D.C. and also George McClain from Newport News. For Andrew, thanks for listening to Sports Scene. I'm Greg Bicouvaris, and we'll talk to you soon.